Today we're seeing how easily we can put together some costume jewelry by hand. Stay tuned. Greetings adventurers and welcome to Skill Tree, where we learn how to do just about everything. So as I said in the forward, we are learning how to make some costume jewelry, specifically some of this Tudor style like medals of office for a friend. He's going to be using this at a LARP event and wants it to look kind of like grand and whatever, but also be tough enough to last. Now in the past we have done some metal castings, but I'm afraid that's going to be way too heavy, especially with how chunky that I'm going to be making these. And if you've watched those, I'm not great at it yet. I'm afraid that the details are going to get muddied and it's going to take me forever and just not look as good as it could. So yeah, the goal here today is to make it look as at least costume good as possible while keeping it lightweight and strong. So I figured the easiest way to do this is use one of my favorite materials, this super sculpty clay. This is a polymer clay that hardens when you heat it. So you can stick it just in your oven when you're done with it, and then it'll polymerize, I suppose, and become basically just a plastic. One of my favorite tools to work with this clay is actually this pasta kind of roller here. By just simply rolling it through, I can get a really uniform size, which is pretty much the thickest I want this thing to be. Basically somewhere between like 1/8 and 1/4 inch, somewhere around there. Now the example our friend Art gave us for what he's looking for is actually this Tudor style necklace here. And while not making it exactly that, I did kind of want to get that sizing right. And it looks like the mouth of this jar right here is going to do me just perfect. So I use that kind of like a cookie cutter, making the indent deep enough so I can just kind of pull it apart in that circle. You don't really want to use the mouth of a jar like that to push all the way into the clay, because then you'll get it out, but it'll stay stuck in the mouth, and then you got to kind of poke it out and it's going to ruin your shape. It's not worth it. Just get most of the way down and you can just pull it apart. Now, in the past, I have sculpted this clay, like used sculpting tools to make it, but I wanted this to be a little bit more precise, and also, I don't have a lot of time. I wanted it to be as easy as possible. So I've decided to actually utilize some of my leather stamps. These are perfect. They come in various different kind of shapes and sizes, and they're made to be kind of daisy chained together to make really ornate patterns. So I started with this little fan burst pattern and just kind of worked it all around the outside to kind of frame my piece in. Then I went around the inside of that with this scallop punch here. Again, just building out that detail and making it look more ornate. Then to class it up just a bit, I added some of this filigree stamp here. I really like the cross functionality of certain tools. Like, it's cool that you can use leather stamps in clay this way, right? There's a bunch of different uses you can use for the same tools, and I dig that. All right, so in the middle of these little medallions here, I want there to be a gem. He specifically asked for it to be a black gem because his character is gonna have like a skull mask and stuff. It's gonna be kind of a darker but noble dude. So I found these little black costume gems at Michael's, which will fit perfectly in this space. I just kind of pushed it in to give me a nice indentation of where it'll rest. Then, knowing how that'll be framed in the middle, I went back in with a cedar just to add a little bit of extra detail. But I did notice that the gem just kind of looked plopped on there at this time. I did want to frame it out a little bit better, just for looks really. So I ended up adding this little noodle o clay around it, and then using this little plastic spatula just to smooth it all out and make sure the ends matched. Finally, I used that cedar stamp to push all the way through in 4 even spots, just so I can have some connection points for when I actually string this thing together. I also removed that little gem because we're gonna have to bake these to harden them, and I'm pretty sure those are just plastic. I think it would melt, so yeah. With that good, I just used my spatula to carefully separate it from the table and put it aside. And then did the same exact thing on the next piece. Really, this whole thing is just made up of 3 different pieces. There's those large scallop ones, which take up most of it. Then there's these small little connective pieces. And then finally, the more pendant pieces that go right in the middle here. To help me more perfectly craft this shape, so I'm not like by hand carving stuff, I was actually able to use these rounded punches just to take out the corners and add that little scalloping on the sides for both that larger pendant and the smaller connective pieces here. Once I was done with all that decorating, I just stuck these things in the oven for about 15 minutes, and check it out, they're perfect. Little plastic pieces that hold their shape, all the detail is exactly like I want it. Now, if you're going for ultimate ease, I suppose you could just do this, right? You can make a whole bunch of these. I think the complete making of those things took me like 20 minutes, half hour tops. I don't trust that I could duplicate the same design over and over again. Each one would be a little different, which I guess isn't bad. I'm sure in those hand-wrought pieces of old, there's gonna be little differences between them. But I really wanted this to be something that not only looks very uniform, But I'm also able to mill out a bunch of, because who knows when I might need these shapes again. I think it'd be cool just to have them. Maybe we can figure out better ways to make this and try other things in the future. So I decided to cast them out of some resin. I know it might sound intimidating to some of you who've never used resin before, but trust me, it's crazy easy. First things first, I just made this little trough here out of cardboard, just kind of roughly taped together. It just has to be tight enough that a thick liquid can't escape out of it, that's all. And of course, big enough so all your pieces fit inside. Now, because these pieces are so light, I was afraid that as I poured the mold in, it would float to the top and kind of ruin the whole thing. So I just added a little bit of hot glue to the back of them so that I can stick them into place. You want that hot glue to be really, really thin, like flat as can be against it, just enough to hold it down, but not enough that it's gonna bump it up and allow that, mold material to slide underneath it. Now, the molding material I am using is this Smooth On Mold Star. And they're not a sponsor, but I can't recommend Smooth On enough. I love Smooth On, they're great. Anyways, preparing it is super, super easy. All you're doing is adding equal parts of the A and the B parts together, and then thoroughly mixing them for around a minute. Once that's together, we can actually start adding it to our pieces here. I like to go in first with the spoon and just really dig it into all the little spaces, which not only helps make sure that it gets to those spaces, but it makes sure there's no little air bubbles. The biggest thing when you're making a mold of any sort is air likes to get trapped inside of that viscous liquid, right? It's hard for those little air bubbles to get out. So if a little air bubble gets stuck into one of our detail parts there, that's gonna be totally wiped away. You're just gonna see air bubble. By slathering it on first, we make sure we get rid of all those air bubbles that are directly touching our detail, and then we can fill it the rest of the way up, letting it even itself out and just leave it to harden. It also can't help if you tap it a little bit. The vibrations help bubbles kind of detach from things and get away. Then once the cure time is up, I just simply pull it apart and check that out. The detail is perfect. There doesn't seem to be any spots in there where bubbles were. Everything looks great. I love this stuff. But now that we have that, we can infinitely duplicate this, right? We can use resins, we can use other silicones, we can make it basically out of anything we want that can go into a silicone mold. And y'all know I love having tools that just manufacture things easily when I need them. Which is why I'm really glad to talk about today's sponsor, Squarespace. If you want the ultimate kind of easy button for making a website, like just the perfect tool for making this thing happen, I couldn't recommend Squarespace enough. I've been using Squarespace since we began this business of Skilltree. It's how we built our first website, got some of our stuff out there in the world, started introducing little patterns and things. And with us being as busy as we are actually making the content for this channel, having something that's that easy to put a website together is just mint. I love it. Squarespace has a huge amount of templates to get you started, and you can tweak each one of them to get it to be exactly what you need. And as if having that library of templates to start from wasn't super easy already, their design intelligence tool, which is an AI that helps you build your website, makes it even easier. Squarespace is just a great way to supercharge your business, giving you the ability to add in payment portals, storefronts, a gallery of videos if you're a YouTube channel like us. Then when you're ready to share that masterpiece with the world, just go to squarespace.com/skilltree to save 10% off of your first website domain. Again, we love using Squarespace, and I'm pretty sure you will too, so go give it a try. All right, now that we have our mold built, it's time to actually make these pieces. For that, I'm gonna be using this resin that I got from Michaels, specifically because it is fast setting, which I need because I do all these in a weekend, and it is black. So whenever you're trying to paint something to look like metal, it's really nice for it to have a black underlayer. Normally that ends up being another coat of paint, which this will still be. But if anything chips off, having that black underneath really just adds a little bit of shadow to the piece. It doesn't show up too crazy. And if any happens to show through, like flash through your paint, it just adds depth to the piece. It doesn't like detract from it. So this stuff works exactly the same way though. You're just mixing equal parts of the resins together, and then I'm carefully pouring it into my mold. This one's really, really thin, so I can just kind of start at the middle and let it find its own center, which is also a really good way to make sure there are no bubbles, because as it moves along, it has the ability to push air aside and let it escape easily. And look at how good these come out. This is probably the best casting I think I've ever done. Like, it's got the most detail. They look really good just out of the mold. And because this stuff sets up at just under a half of an hour, I'm able to make just a whole bunch of them pretty quickly. And though there is a little bit of this messy flashing around the sides of them, it is so thin that you can just kind of go in with a razor and peel it right off. Now, these are shiny and beautiful, but that actually kind of poses a problem. They're so smooth that I'm afraid that like anything I put on them paint-wise or whatever isn't going to stick very well. It's gonna wanna come off. So before I actually get to painting it, I just hit the entire thing with some like 200 grit sandpaper. Not enough to leave deep gouges, but just enough to rough up the surface to give the paint something to grab onto. Then I hit it with a light base coat of a black primer, just again to give more stuff for our top coat to adhere to. For that top coat, I am using a metallic silver. It's the brightest one I could find. I want it to be reflective as possible, which is this Rust-Oleum metallic silver here. And I have to say, that looks pretty good. It is shiny, it's got some good reflection to it. If any of you have done stuff like this before, I thought about using Rub and Buff, which comes in a little tiny tube, and it's like a wax-based thing. You can shine it to like a really nice polish. It looks super metallic, and I really wanted to use it for this, but I have been to events and they get hot, and it is a waxed-based thing. So I was afraid of it getting hot, and this character especially is gonna be wearing all black, it getting hot and dyeing his clothing or whatever, because it will be right up against the clothing. So that's why I'm using paint instead, in case you were wondering. Now, as cool as that looks shiny, it just looks kind of flat and shiny, right? Like, it doesn't have any depth that makes it look more fake when it's just that one kind of flat color. To fix this, we're gonna need a wash. I didn't have a wash, unfortunately, but luckily they're dead easy to make. All we're doing is taking a little bit of brown paint here, and we're adding it to my cup. Then we're diluting it out with water and mixing it up until it's about the consistency of like milk. It's not as viscous as water. It's just got a little bit of thickness to it, you know? Then the secret sauce to this stuff though is adding just a little bit of dish soap to it. So dish soap breaks up the surface tension of the water. It stops it from forming little beads, which is what's gonna help that stuff get into the little cracks everywhere. With a wash, all you do is paint it all over your piece, making sure it gets into the little crevices and everything. And then you carefully pat it dry. This is gonna leave behind a little bit of pigment in all of the deepest spots, giving the whole piece a lot of depth. Exactly like how you antique leather. And when held side by side, you can automatically see the difference. The one with the wash just has so much more depth and character, it looks more realistic, right? Like an aged piece of metal. So of course I just carried on doing the exact same thing to all the pieces. Next I went in with my awl and just kind of scratched up where the gem is gonna go so the glue had something to grab onto. I don't really want glue grabbing onto paint because paint can pull off, right? I'm afraid that over time it's gonna wiggle itself loose enough that it's gonna pull the paint off. By scratching it up with the awl, I'm actually making scratches into the plastic itself, giving little grooves for my glue to grab onto. That glue I'm using, by the way, is just this super glue here. I put some down on the base, and then I spray the back of my gem with an accelerator, which just makes that glue harden immediately on contact, giving it a nice firm hold and instant satisfaction, which I love. All right, so with all those pieces constructed, all that's left to do is to stick them together in a chain-like fashion. To do that, I actually have these black jump rings that were given to us by friend of the channel, Eric E. Just a long time ago. Eric, I'm sorry that I'm finally getting around to using some of those jump rings. You gave me a lot. Jump rings like this are dead easy to use though. All you do is kind of spread the little arms of them apart so that you can loop it into your piece. And then you close them back together, making sure those ends touch, forming a nice little ring that you can connect things to. I went ahead and did this to all of the open holes on each one of my pieces. Then I used other rings in the middle of those just to connect the pieces together. And then just rinse and repeat in the same pattern over and over again until I formed a loop. And upon finally closing this loop, check this thing out. Oh my God, it looks so cool. I mean, I'm in a t-shirt, so it's like really dressing this piece down a bit, I guess. My very casual place of office, I suppose, in the Tudor kingdom. But yeah, I think that came out pretty good, right? Could it be a little bit more shiny? Yeah, I think so. Before a nice costume piece that is, do this without hitting the mic, that's super lightweight. It's going to be resilient, like, you know, it's plastic. If it ever gets dinged or whatever, you can just kind of touch it up with a little bit of paint. I think it looks pretty good. And I think it looks not terribly unlike the picture, right? I went the black jump rings, by the way, not only because I had them, I did have some silver ones, but I think that this kind of gives that mood a little bit. He's a very dark character. So the black gems and the black chain, I think just kind of add to the look. But it's easy enough to change them if he doesn't like them, so yeah. And I'm curious what you think. What are some other things we can do to this to make it look even more metallic? Do you know some other paints that are gonna work better than what I use? Or just in general, the casting and molding, maybe you know some other tricks. Definitely leave them down in the comment section below. And while you're down there, if you liked what we did here today, just give us some of that like it love, and don't forget to subscribe so you know when we release new content. In the meantime though, keep leveling up, you. You made it to the end screen. YouTube loves it when you do that, and it's a fantastic way to support this channel. Another fantastic way to support this channel is by joining these people's noble ranks. These are our Patreon members, and we can't do any of this without them. They are the weighty chain of office around our neck that gives us the authority to craft. A giant shout out, by the way, to our Grandmaster tier Patreon members, Froggy and Dragon Designs. If you like what we do here and want to support us, consider joining our Patreon, link in the description below. Otherwise, you can check out one of these videos that YouTube thinks you'd like, and that helps out a lot too. Now, if you don't mind me, I've got important matters of office to do, like mailing this out. But you know, thanks for watching this far. See you next time.